Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting of March 28, 2018. Will everyone please stand for the salute to the flag? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to note that this meeting is, notice of this meeting has been satisfied in accordance with Chapter 231 PL 1975 by advertising in the Home News Tribune, notifying the Sentinel Publishing Company and the Star Ledger, and posting on the bulletin board and filing with the Borough Clerk. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Emma?
Here.
Ms. Cataldo?
Here.
Mr. Corrigan?
Here.
Mr. Savilli?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Mr. Foley?
Here. First thing before we start, I want to welcome Dave Savilli to the Board of Adjustment. To let the board know that a resignation of Pat Walsh was put in last week, and the Mayor and Council appointed Dave Savilli to the unexpired term. Welcome aboard, Dave Savilli. Welcome.
Let the record reflect Mr. Kaczynski is alive.
I want to do the resolutions from the last meeting first, before we start with the applications.
Board members, we have a couple resolutions this evening. We're taking matter because some of the attorneys wanted to be here for the adoption at the request of their clients, so we don't want to have them sitting here cooling their heels. The first resolution is the 901 Ernston Road LLC, which we all know as the RCA Recovery Centers. There was two cases there. There was 17-21, which was the original appeal of the zoning officer's determination, and then the actual use variance itself, 17-29. The 1729, as you all recall, was a denial. So that's before the board. May we have a vote?
I move that the resolutions be adopted as written.
Second?
You know, we heard that one on January 24th. You were here.
Yeah, you were here. Yeah. Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Then the next one we have, the proper name is Retlaw 967 LLC, that we all know is the Wawa application. That was case number 16-28. We heard that last month, and that was coming back from after the litigation, and the board approved that application. Do you have a motion to approve the resolution?
Make a motion that we approve the application.
Second.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry? Oh, yes. Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
I think I excused myself
Yes.
on that.
Yes, you did.
Okay. Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
The next application we have is the Manchester Hill Road LLC, which is case number ZBA 18-01. We heard this last month. That was the homeowner, or the purchaser, who was buying the undersized lot on 37 Coyle Street, which the board approved. Do we have a motion on that resolution?
I make a motion that we approve the resolution.
Second it.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito? Mr. Foley?
Yes. Okay, the last application we have is Gillette Enterprises, which was the storage container and trailer storage operation out on Journey Mill Road. That was case number ZB 16-26. The board heard that last month and denied the application. Do we have a motion on the resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Green?
Before I vote, a yes vote is a denial.
No.
No, a yes is to approve the resolution denying the application.
Denying the
So it means you're
application.
satisfied with the form of the resolution.
Yes.
And Mr. Corrigan didn't vote
Didn't
for
vote.
it.
He voted the opposite.
Right, yeah.
He didn't- Yeah,
Someone else should.
someone
Second.
else should second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Rama.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski? Oh,
All right, then.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes. Okay, that's all the resolutions we have. Thank you, board members.
Okay, with the resolutions taken care of, we're going to hear the first case, 14-19, Quick Check.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Marmore, for the applicant, Quick Check Corporation. I know you have a full hearing room, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. I'm certainly willing to answer any questions. You may recall I was
John,
here-
if you would, the microphone doesn't pick up well, you have to hold it close.
Hold it,
There
okay.
you go.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it.
John Marmora for the applicant, Quick Check Corporation. This is the property of 3101 Bordentown Avenue. You may recall I was here before you just about 3 years ago. At that point, Quick Check was a tenant in that strip center. They were the end cap and received approvals from you to redevelop the entire site for a gas station and convenience store. Since then, they have closed on the property. They were a tenant at that time. So they have acquired the property. You also recall there was a dry cleaner, and that's always a problem. So right now, they are working on the remediation. They anticipate going for a site-wide groundwater and soils RAO, remedial action outcome. As Jay would tell you, in the old days, we called them an NFA, the no further action letter we used to get from the DEP. They don't do that anymore, but we anticipate having that done this year, so that we would then hopefully be in a demolition phase and pulling permits before this current extension, if you're inclined to grant it to us, would expire, which would be, of course, in March, this time next year, March 2019. So with that, I would answer any questions, but we respectfully ask for one more year and do reiterate that Quick Check remains very much committed to the environmental remediation of the property and the redevelopment of the property pursuant to your approval. Thank you.
What is the board's pleasure?
I have a question. So the environmental is gonna take a year?
We hope shorter than a year. We hope to be completed in calendar year 2018. They submitted what was called a remedial investigation report, which was limited to the groundwater and soil issues for the dry cleaner. They've now determined to go for a site-wide soil and groundwater RAO. So it'll take a little more time. They got some comments from the DEP, but they do expect to be able to, they don't believe any more remediation is required. The DEP just needs to evaluate certain things, but they expect to have that completed this year. They will then do an asbestos survey and before they demolish the building. Those are the remaining environmental tasks.
So that sounds like a lot of ifs and beliefs. Is it possible to give a 2-year extension, just because things happen, right?
You've got only one extension?
We only had one, so I guess we could get
Yeah, the board has the
That's-
ability to grant a 2-year extension if they like, which sounds reasonable in the circumstances.
I mean, that just suggest that to the rest of the board members.
We'd certainly appreciate it.
If that's the
Could
board's
get-
pleasure, they
could
have
be
the
a little
authority to
bit,
do so.
yeah. If the board is inclined to grant the 2 years, we would certainly be happy. And do not anticipate ever having to come back before you. on that.
I can make that motion that we give an extension for 2 years.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
We are taking the applications out of order. The next application will be 1803, Mark Nichols.
Good evening, Mr. Nichols. I'm just going to swear you in, sir. Just raise your right hand. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So, just tell the board what you're asking for and why. Yeah, just keep it close.
Yes, at my property, there's an older fence there, and basically what I want to do is erect a new, nicer fence for the property. It's right on Main Street, and the fence that's up now is falling down, and it doesn't look appealing at all. So I want to put up a nice PVC fence and make the property look nicer for the township and for my tenants.
Okay, and the fence you're putting up, is it replacing the existing fence, or are you going to make it
Yes,
longer,
sir.
or anything?
The existing fence, yes, sir. That one would come down in the same place. New one would go up.
Yeah, yeah. And the existing fence is how high?
Right now, it's 5 feet. I was asking to go to 6 feet.
6 feet?
Yes,
And
sir.
so you don't have to buy all the panels and cut a foot off the bottom?
Well, I figured it would be nicer for the tenants because it'd give them, the property's very busy, so I'd give them more privacy. So I thought it would be a little nicer, that's all.
Okay.
Anyone have any questions?
I just have one for Jay. Jay, could you maybe enlighten us about the location of the fence and the view coming down this Washington Road?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was going to raise that question. The existing fence, as indicated, is 5 feet high, but it is located within the existing site triangle at the intersection of the street. So by making it a 6 foot high, technically you're making it a little worse than it is now. The other issue with that lot is even the driveway itself is closer to the corner than it should be, but that's an existing condition as well. So it's really up to the board how to want to go through and handle that. But the concern would be with making it a worse condition with the site triangle by having a higher fence.
Do you know if that inhibits the view from where the location of the fence is now?
Well, as it is now, it's within that site triangle, so that's,
Right.
but that's pre-existing, and that fence has been there for, I'm sure, for a number of
Yes,
years.
sir. 20 years I've owned.
Right, yeah, so,
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and it's to Jay again. There's a concrete wall. Is the fence on that wall? Does that affect the height of the fence?
it's not, no, the fence is not on top of the wall. The wall's on actually the adjacent property. This fence kind of runs around the corner and butts up against the wall.
So is this property higher or lower than the adjacent property?
It's lower, it sits down lower. I have some Google pictures if you wanted to see what it looks like. I can go down.
This picture represents the 5-foot fence, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And this fence is, like this one, it looks like it's a picket fence with openings.
Yeah, the openings doesn't affect you. You can't see through it anyway, to be honest with you. It's,
Would you be amenable to a 5-foot fence?
whatever you the board thinks is right, I have no problem. I would
Right.
prefer the 6, but, you know, I'm here to do the right thing and make sure that you folks agree.
This is the only
Right.
one we need to have 4 feet.
That's, you know, the site triangle is a safety issue, so that's kind of tricky.
I understand that. I just wanted to see what you folks thought. And I was hoping to get to 6 feet, but if that's not the case, if I can do the PVC, that would be fine also.
We like your idea of putting a new fence up. We know that that's the appropriate thing. It's just that the site triangle is a little bit of a problem
I
on the
understand.
6 foot. That extra foot could mean quite a bit.
The way I see it, the people would be in a car anyway, and it's not like they'd be able to see any higher, except going further up to the stop sign. So that's why I didn't think it would affect anything, because they're still sitting in a vehicle in any case. It's not like they'd be up in a big truck where they could, that's just my opinion.
I'm past the stop sign.
And does the fence go all around the property?
Usually the camera is midway.
I don't know what kind of
You'd have
picture,
to
but
pull out.
it stops at the beginning of the driveway and comes across the front of the home.
Oh, but it doesn't go across the back?
No, there's gonna be, what I'm asking for, is just gonna be one, piece to keep, the other yard from being able to get into the yard that's there, because the gentleman put a fence up higher in the property, so, I'm just gonna put one just to close it off.
Oh, so between the two homes in the backyard to
Yes,
give them
sir,
separate
just gonna be
yards?
one, just so you can't
Okay.
go out
So-
to the street.
Right, so I think
for
the board's, and then on the house next to you on Brookside, is there a fence on that side of your property?
On the 5 side, on Brookside?
Yeah, if you're standing in the street looking it to the right, is there a fence on the right side of your property?
Yes, I was gonna put it.
Extend that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the board is really concerned with the fence that would face on Brookside and Main Street,
I
that corner.
understand.
Make that
Absolutely.
5 feet, the one in the backyard can be 6, and the one going to your neighbor can be 6 as well. It's just the site triangle corner here on Brookside and Main that we would need to be 5 feet.
You would prefer that it be?
Yeah, just for safety purposes. And the other ones can all be 6 feet.
Okay.
Jay, I have a question. When you come out of Brookside and you're looking to the right, that's going uphill, right?
I believe it is, yes.
Gotta open it to the public.
Yeah.
Jay, can I see that picture that you just had up there? If you're parked here and you're looking left or right, it's not even away.
You have to remember, this camera is on top of the door.
Let's see what the
So
public.
the SUV. You're looking at it, so you're gonna
I want to open this application up to the public. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on this application on Brookside Avenue? Come forward, please.
I'm just gonna have to hand over the Mr. Nichols, to that gentleman so he can speak.
Thank you. I'm a little bit,
I
don't
just
know.
need to swear you in, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right, don't worry about it. You swear firm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And please give us your name and spell your last name.
First name is Robert, last name is DiPreta, spelled D as in David E, capital P as in Peter, R-E, T as in Thomas A.
Thank you, Mr. DePretta. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I know, I just received this application, and it says, adjacent property owners, it says, request variance to replace old wooden fence around property yards with new 6-foot PVC. I believe this is the property that's in my backyard, that's in my backyard? I'm not sure, right? 'Cause I'm a little confused right now.
It's the property at the corner of Brookside and Main Street.
That's the corner property?
It's the corner property.
Okay, then that wouldn't affect me then, because people are working on a house, which is maybe 2 houses down the street.
Yeah.
And they said old wooden fence. I have an old wooden fence in my backyard that butts up against their house. So that's why I thought this
Nope, not
pertained to
you.
me, so I am, thank you.
No problem. Have a good evening. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this application?
I move the public portion be closed.
Second?
Jay,
Public portion is closed.
I just want to make a note, that's a Google snapshot that you took?
Yes.
Well, the camera is on top of a car, so you're probably, it could be 8, 9 feet above. So when you're talking about pulling up to that street in a car, the sight triangle is going to be a lot worse.
Well, let me just clarify what the site triangle is. It's measured along the center line of both roadways. If you take the center line of Main Street, center line of Brookside, intersect those together, and you strike a line 90 feet back from that angle point, that's what's considered the site triangle. So anything within that 90-foot triangle is considered something that is potentially an obstruction. So that's what I'm saying, it's in the site triangle, that's what I mean. I'm not looking at the picture and saying it's a height issue.
Oh, well, yeah,
It's within
But
that
if you
physical
think
area.
it's doable, what I'm saying is that that camera is misleading. There's a camera on top of a vehicle, so it's actually higher. So you could actually see over the fence. In a car, you wouldn't be able to.
Correct, yes. Yeah, I think also it should be pointed out that this is in the existing front yard setback. So that's a pre-existing condition, but it's supposed to be at the setback line is where the fence is supposed to be located. So the existing fence is approximately 5 feet off the property line. It should be back a lot further than it is. But again, this is an existing condition.
So the fence should be back even with the driveway?
It should meet the front yard setback requirement, which would be 20 foot.
10.
I'm sorry, it's half the front yard setback. Yeah, so it would be 10 on that side.
Yeah,
And he's proposing 5.
And it's just on the Main Street side that creates
Correct,
the
yes,
setback
correct.
variance. The Brookside is compliant.
We could keep it at 5 feet.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the application be approved with a 5-foot fence as we have spoken of.
Second?
Just on that corner.
Yeah, just on the intersection side, the rest can be 6. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
I have a motion for a 6-foot fence except on the site, which would be a 5-foot. Roll call?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Ms. Catala?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
You're approved, sir.
Okay, I'm just questioning, so it's gonna be 5 feet on the Main Street side and 5 feet across the front on the 3?
Yeah, so from the building, so from the house towards Main Street, facing on Brookside is 5 feet. Then it turns and goes parallel with Main Street.
Main Street, 5 feet.
Those two pieces need to be
Keep
5.
that 5?
Yep.
And I could go 6,
In the
okay.
backyard 6, and then the other side
Okay.
against your neighbor, you can go 6 feet there.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
evening.
You want some pictures? You want some pictures?
Okay, the next application will be 17-15 Interstate Outdoor Advertising.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. David Himmelman, nice to see everyone. Before we move forward, just some housekeeping. I think on application 17-13, which is the other interstate application, we're going, I believe, to carry that to a future date with notice to be provided upon confirmation of the rescheduling of that hearing by the board. Is that satisfactory, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And, Mr. Hillman, I apologize, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if we're running out of time to make a decision, but you'll give us an extension of time?
Absolutely.
For 6 months, let's say, just to be on the safe
That's more than
side?
appropriate.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hillman.
Members of the board, as I indicated, my name is David Himmelman. I represent Interstate Outdoor Advertising, who is the applicant on this matter. And this is a preliminary and final major site plan and conditional use variance that we seek. And for the record, the property is identified as Block 292.03, Lot 3, and that's Block 295, and Lots 101, 3, and 4, and otherwise known on your tax map as 6056 Highway, Route 35, and Route 9. And I think you'll be hearing tonight, we're going to generally refer to this as the Phoenix Truck Site. So when the witnesses and myself refer to that, because it's too long to say Route 9 and 35 all night, so I apologize in advance. As you know from the application, the applicant seeking approval to erect a new monopole advertising sign on the property. The proposed sign will consist of LED technology on one face and a static display on the other. As you also know, the property is located in the B3 Highway Business Zone. Billboards are a permitted use with conditions in the B3 Highway Business Zone, and since the applicant cannot satisfy certain of those conditions, a conditional use variance, otherwise known as D3, is required. The applicant seeks certain bulk variance relief, and just to clarify the record, there are several conditions which I'll run through, which our planner will identify in more detail, and those are referring to in your ordinance section 2685, 982, which is minimum distance to another billboard, 1,000 feet required, and we are proposing 930 feet from the proposed sign to the existing billboard. Also in section 2685 under 9A, 6 minimum distance to a residentially zoned property, 300 feet is required and 63 feet is proposed. In section 2685 9A7, the maximum sign height 50 feet is required and the applicant is proposing 60 feet. In section 26-85 9A 9, the minimum setback line from the property line, 30 feet is required, and we are proposing 10 feet. And obviously those particular bulk variance relief will be discussed in quite detail as the application proceeds. Just for the order for tonight, so we've got several witnesses. We've got 4 witnesses, Mr. Chairman. Our first witness will be Tom Grabowski, who's our project engineer, and he's going to generally testify on the site plan. Jeffrey Gerber, who's President and Chief Operating Officer of the applicant, and he'll testify on the site background, on the application, the site selection, the status of NJDOT permits, signage details, including benefits. We also have Robert Newell, who will be our lighting design expert, who will testify on the off-site impacts from the digital sign. And finally, our planner, John McDonough, who will testify on the variance sought for the application and the justifications for each. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything further as far as my opening. Unless the board has any questions, we can proceed with our first witness.
If I could, Mr.
Sure.
Could you explain what you mean by static, the side static?
We will explain that in great detail, and I think I'll have Mr. Gerber go through that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom? You know what, why don't you take this, Tom?
Good evening, sir. Why don't I swear you in when we're getting set up? You swear firm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please give us your name, spell your name, last name for the record.
My name is Z. Thomas Grabowski, Grybowski.
Thank you, sir. Please continue, Mr. Himmelman.
Thank you. Mr. Grabowski, if you can just give the board a brief background on your education, licenses you hold, and that you've testified before planning and zoning boards in the state of New Jersey, and then we can qualify you as an expert. Thank you.
Sure. I am a licensed land surveyor and planner in New Jersey. I've been licensed since 1977. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Newark College of Engineering, and I've appeared at numerous zoning and planning boards throughout the state, testifying to these types of applications.
Thank you. We would like to have the board qualify Mr. Grabowski as an expert
I
in
move
survey
Mr.
and engineering.
Grabowski be qualified as an engineer.
Second?
Proceed.
Mr. Grabowski, it's my understanding that under your familiarity, that your firm has prepared a site plan in connection with this proposed billboard. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And for the record, that site plan, I guess, was last revised through June 2nd, 2017, is that correct?
17, yes.
Okay. So what I would ask you to do is sort of go through an overview of the site plan, the property description, the proposed sign, and give us the appropriate details related to all of that. Thank you.
Okay.
And for the record, that, just so what you're going to testify to has already been provided to the board with the application, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So we don't need to mark it if there's
I
been
don't-
no changes to it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, my office prepared this plan. We established the property boundary based on a field survey. The property, this lot 3 where the sign is actually 0.56 acres. We researched and reviewed the zoning data, prepared a site plan per your township ordinances and checklists, and the applicant determined the sign location, the height, and the setbacks. As was mentioned, the subject property is located on the east side of State Highway Route 9 and 35, just north of Raritan Street. The parcel itself is developed as a used truck dealership, and the proposed monopole right here is located within the used truck display area. This is all display area here. Access to the site is from existing driveway off of the highway, and the adjacent properties to the north and south of this parcel are both developed commercially. The subject property is not within a flood hazard area per FEMA firm maps. Regarding the sign itself, it's a V-shaped, two-sided outdoor advertising sign having a 20-foot spread in the rear of the sign. The northern sign face is digital. There's a detail here. This is the digital sign, and the southern sign face is a static sign. The sign size for both sides are 14 by 48, which is 672 square feet per side, or 1,344 square feet total. The sign is supported by a 4-foot diameter steel monopole, and the sign is 60 feet high from the grade at the base of the sign to the top of the sign. The sign is located within the existing blacktop area where the used trucks are displayed, and that's this area here. And the front face of the sign is 10 feet off of the highway, right-of-way, not the pavement, but the right-of-way. And the rear sign, the rear yard dimension is 62.3 feet to the rear of the property. We are in the B3 Highway Business District where billboards are permitted as a conditional use. And as was mentioned, there are 4 variances that are being requested. This pretty much sums it up.
Tom, have you covered everything you want to address in the site plan overview?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further direct questions. I open it up to the board and your professionals.
Anyone from the board wish to comment or speak in reference to this witness?
I have a question. This sign, will that be protected at the bottom by poles for safety issues that if someone drives into it, they'll be stopped before they hit the sign where it would come down?
Well, there are no bollards around the poles, around the monopole right now, but I don't think it would be a problem to put several bollards around the sign for protection from the vehicles.
Thank you.
This pole, is this steel?
Yes,
The main pole is steel.
the main pole is steel, yes.
So it would be a less likelihood of a car or a truck hitting that pole and knocking that sign down, am I correct?
Yes, I mean, it's it has to be a substantial strength to you maintain the sign because of the height and everything. So it is a strong, durable sign. But I think I'm not the best person to answer that question, but I think it is a durable monopole, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You said something, the existing sign, is there a
Oh, I'm sorry, proposed sign.
proposed sign? Okay, so there is not a sign
There,
there?
there,
Okay,
no.
thank you.
Freudian slip.
Yes.
I have a question for Jay. The, just as a frame of reference, there's an Exxon sign at the Exxon station. How tall is that, do you know?
I don't have information, I don't know if the applicant has specific information on the height.
My understanding is that's approximately 44 feet in height.
Okay.
One other question. Is this where I can ask about the static?
I would rather have Mr. Gerber respond, only because I want you to understand the technical differences, and I could give you an explanation as to what I understand, but I'd rather have the applicant address that. Is that fair, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of this witness? Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next witness is Jeffrey Gerber, who has indicated is Chief Operating Officer for Interstate Outdoor. We should have him sworn in.
Good evening, Mr. Gerber. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And please give us your name, spell your last name.
Jeffrey Gerber, Gerber.
Thank you, sir. Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, you may recall that Mr. Gerber had testified on the previous application, which has now been continued, and we're not requesting that the board accept him as an expert, but I think it's important to understand his personal background and his affiliation to the company, because it puts his testimony in perspective, but we're not asking for the board to consider him as an expert. So I just wanted to make that reference. So,
He's the CEO of Interstate.
what's that?
He's the CEO of Interstate.
Correct.
So obviously, he deals with these signs day in and day out as a
Exactly.
person. So he has a pretty good understanding and background of it, not necessarily an expert like a planner or an engineer, but he's very knowledgeable in the field.
That is an excellent statement.
All right, well, we understand. Thank you.
So, Mr. Gerber, with that in mind, would you just give the board, and I know the board did hear a summation of your experience and your educational background and your relationship to Interstate Outdoor on the prior application, but if you could go through that, and then we can go through a series of other questions. Thank
Sure.
you.
I'm a 1984 graduate of Rutgers College, 1987 graduate of Rutgers School of Law. From 1987 until 1991, I was a Deputy Attorney General. I was assigned to the Department of Transportation, and one of my assignments included being counsel to the outdoor advertising section in the New Jersey Department of Transportation. The outdoor advertising section regulates all outdoor advertising signs in the state of New Jersey. Without a permit from the Department of Transportation, you cannot have an outdoor advertising sign. And my roles included enforcing the department's regulations, promulgating regulations, and ensuring compliance with the Highway Beautification Act, which ties 10% of the department's annual construction funding to federal funding, to 10% to control outdoor advertising. 1991, I left the Attorney General's office and joined the law firm of Bressler, Amory, and Ross in Morristown, New Jersey, first as an associate, later as a partner. I represented numerous outdoor advertising companies in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, and all aspects of outdoor advertising, from leasing to obtaining state permits to obtaining local approvals, as we're doing here tonight. And in January of 2001, I left Bressler, Amory, and Ross and joined Interstate Outdoor Advertising as its Chief Operating Officer and President of Business Development, which is a position I've held for the last 17 years. I've been involved in over 300 sign applications in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, and Louisiana. And I've handled all aspects from the permitting to site selection, to all necessary approvals, to leasing, as well as overseeing construction of the signs.
Very good. Now, just for, to put the project site in sort of reference point, could you just explain the contractual relationship that your company has with the current owner?
We have a lease with Phoenix Truck to build an outdoor advertising sign on their property.
Great, thank you. Now, it's my understanding, Mr. Gerber, that you would like to refer to several exhibits this evening. Is that correct?
Yes, just to give some perspective and to explain why we selected this location and what we considered.
Now, before you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but are these exhibits have not been submitted?
Right, I was going to start to identify them so
All
they
right.
can be marked.
So why don't we have those marked?
Okay, so the first exhibit, which will be marked A1 and A2. A1 is simply a map of the overall area as part of Central Jersey. A2 is a aerial photo of the Phoenix Truck site. Superimposed is the proposed location of the outdoor advertising sign and shows the surrounding area. A3 is a view of heading southbound on routes 9 and 35. It's what we call a cross read. You look to your left to see the proposed sign. That's a rendering of the proposed sign as how it would look as we have proposed based upon the site plan. And I'll explain to the board in a minute how we prepared that rendering. And then the other rendering is, the second picture on this board, which would be A4, is a northbound view of the proposed sign, what we call a right-hand read with a rendering of the sign. If you go back to that prior exhibit. So first thing I think is helpful to the board is to understand, how did we select Phoenix Truck to be a site for an outdoor advertising sign? Well, there's a number of factors that we consider. First is we look for an area that's either commercially or industrially zoned. The reason for that is you can't get a permit from the Department of Transportation unless the sign is located in a commercial or industrial zone. Once you know you're in the right zone, you look for a major transportation corridor. That's necessary to justify the capital investment to build the sign based upon the amount of cars that travel on that road. So advertisers will be interested in advertising on the sign. Once you know that you've got an area that has the potential to get a state permit and makes sense from a business perspective, the next thing you have to look at is to make sure that the sign doesn't impact any residential areas. We've been doing this for a very long time. We know that no one wants to see an outdoor advertising sign, whether it's digital or static, and I'll explain the static in a minute, whether it's digital or static, seeing that in their bedroom or in their living room. And so we evaluate these sites to make sure that based upon the placement of the sign, that's not going to take place. And I can get into that now, since I've raised it, is why this sign will not impact any residential areas. Obviously, the main residential area here is Kathleen Place and Roberts Circle, which is located, first of all, it's behind the sign. So the sign is not directed to show to any motorists on Kathleen Place or Robert Circle. It's designed to be seen by motorists traveling northbound and southbound on routes 9 and 35. Secondly, you have a major grade difference between the base of the Phoenix Truck property and Kathleen Place. We went out and did some measurements with the pole, and we estimate that the difference in grade is approximately 38 feet between the base of the parking lot there of Phoenix Truck and the base of Kathleen Place. And the difference in grade between Phoenix Truck and Roberts Circle is about 33 feet. We did do a cross-section. I don't know if you have that. We can hand it out to the board members, too. This is a cross-section that we prepared.
And we will identify this, I guess, as A4.
A5.
A5, I apologize.
A5. We need to mark these as we go. Tom's marking as we go along. This is a sketch that we did, and it, explain to you how I have that one. Explain how it was done. Is we actually took a tape measure from the Phoenix Truck property, attached it to a pole, and actually stood on Kathleen Place and determined that there was about a 38-foot difference in grade between the two. And we also measured the canopy, which is the top of the tree canopy is about 65 feet, which is 5 feet higher than the proposed sign elevation. That grade change there and the vegetation that, I guess I'll leave this up here, and the vegetation that's located to the east, I'm sorry, to the west of Kathleen Place and to the south of Robert Circle is really a major buffer for anyone to see the back, and we're talking about the back of the sign, not the advertising faces. No one's going to be able to read the advertising on this sign from any of these streets. And even when the leaves are off, this buffer is still significant in terms of blocking the back of the sign. And at Roberts Circle, because of the angle and because of the topography that's dropped and distance, you have about 400 feet of trees. Leaves or no leaves is a substantial buffer for anyone to be able to see this sign. And so because of that, we felt this was a suitable location for an outdoor advertising sign.
Gerber, if I could just interrupt you. So what the cross-section diagram that's now been marked as A5, that was really done as illustrative in discussions with the board's engineer. Is that my understanding?
That's correct. Just to provide an explanation as to the difference in grade and trying to give the board a visual of how significant it is in terms of the difference in grade.
Very good.
Now,
Mr. Chairman, the setback aspect starts, there's just a line that comes down from the edge of the sign. It's not from where the pole's put in the ground, right? Because you got a 10-foot setback from Route 9, right?
Correct.
Yeah, the engineer explained that, the point of the V, so to speak, from there to the right-of-way is where he measured the 10 feet.
All right, so there's like
Not
this
the pole.
imaginary line that drops down from that
Right.
corner.
Exactly.
That is correct.
Thank you.
okay, if I could maybe explain the nature of this digital versus the static face, because that was what has been requested.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, so this sign is going to have one digital face and one static face. The digital face is what we would call the northern face directed to southbound traffic on 9 and 35. Would be if you're heading southbound on 9 and 35, you would look to your left and you would see this digital face. Would be what we call a cross read. The static face is the southern face directed to northbound traffic heading towards the Garden State Parkway. A static face means it's the traditional outdoor advertising sign type in our business. It's a vinyl that is attached to the face, and this unit would be illuminated by 3 LED 100-watt bulbs. And so it's the most common type of outdoor advertising sign in the country. Static meaning it's just that vinyl on there, as opposed to the digital face, which is what we're proposing on the other side, which is an illuminated face. It's internally illuminated, and it can change messages every 8 seconds. Per New Jersey Department of Transportation regulations, digital signs are allowed to change every 8 seconds with some conditions, one being that there can be no motion, and the sign will have no motion on it. The other condition is that the change in the message must be instantaneous. In other words, you can't even notice that it changes. It just changes. There's no motion in it. There's no flashing in it. It's a quick change. Again, this is all DOT requirements which this sign would meet. So that's the difference between the static and the digital in terms of the static message doesn't change because it's a vinyl. It's been put up. The only time the message will change is when that vinyl is taken down and another vinyl is put on.
So the real distinction is there's no movement and there's no messages that are moving on the static face.
No, there's no, or in the digital face.
Why is that?
What, on movement on what? On the,
Why is there two different kinds of signs on it?
because advertisers have two different types of interests. Some want to have the message up the full time. Some like to be, the great thing about digital for a lot of advertisers is they can change the message every day or every hour if they want. We can change the messages on this digital sign with our cell phone. And so let's say you have a restaurant and you have a breakfast special in the morning, you have an egg special in the morning, $1.99, you can put that on that message in the morning. You can have a lunch special in the afternoon, and you can have a dinner special in the evening. You can change that message 3 times. You can't do that with a vinyl. First of all, the vinyls are expensive. They cost, to change a vinyl, to pay someone to have it produced and have someone put it up costs about $1,000. Changing the message on a digital costs nothing. But some advertisers don't want to have their name on a board with some other message. A jeweler may not want to see their message up there and then see a McDonald's after it. So they want to have the static face, so they'll just put up their jewelry ad for that full time. And that's how it's a matter of choice for most. But a lot of advertisers really like the digital because of the flexibility and being able to change the messages all the time.
Thank you.
Which leads, by the way, to one of the great benefits of having a digital sign. What this sign can also do, in addition to advertise and change messages for advertisers, it can be a very good tool for a municipality. It can be used to provide emergency messaging. What we do is, in the towns that we do business in, we give towns the right to override our advertising on that digital sign. If there's a traffic emergency, fire emergency, a weather alert, there's a hurricane, we'll override all of the commercial messaging on there until the emergency is over. And we've built that into our advertising contracts. We only guarantee 90% of the time that an advertiser actually purchases for that 10% purpose to be able to use for emergencies. We joint venture with another company in the city of Chicago, and we have built 55 faces on City of Chicago-owned property in the last 3 years. And one of the main reasons why they wanted to do it was they wanted to be able to have this great message system that they could communicate to everybody immediately. When you're driving in your car, you're not supposed to be looking at your cell phone. You're supposed to be paying attention to what you're driving. So you can't get a message alert on your phone and pay attention to it, but you can see a digital sign that's warning you about a snow problem, a terrorist problem, an Amber Alert, God forbid, all those things. So that's one of the great benefits of having a digital sign in a municipality. In addition, unfortunately, although we wish we would, we don't sell the sign. It's 8-second flips is how it's sold. So there's 8, we call it 8 seconds once a minute, a 64-second minute, but there's 8-second flips. We almost never have all 8-second flips sold, so there's always availability for public service messaging. So if Sayreville wants to promote a fundraiser for the fire department or for the police department, or if there's a festival that the town wants to promote, that can go up on the sign. It costs nothing, and it reaches a lot of people. It's a really good tool. And we have examples, I think, of some of the, for example, this one here for Hazlet. We built a sign in Hazlet on 35, and they opened up a township pool. And so what they wanted to do, and I guess this will be Exhibit A6, thank you, and 7, is A6 is Hazlet opened up a pool, and they wanted to promote membership, and so we designed the copy for them and posted it at no cost. And here's another example of this is in Montgomery Township in Pennsylvania, where they had a fitness facility, recreation center, they wanted to promote that. Again, we put that on the sign at no cost, and it's a real nice benefit, and it's very effective. And again, these messages can be changed as much as you want at no cost.
Mr. Gerber, would your company be willing, assuming the board would act favorably upon this application, would your firm be willing, as a condition of an approval, to agree to provide those public service announcements?
Public service and the emergency messaging. What we did with Hazlet recently, we met with their police department and worked out a protocol to provide for the override of the commercial messaging in case of an emergency. And so we'd be willing to do that as well.
Do you need those types of messages designed beforehand, or we can
yes,
just
what
give
we
you
did.
the
What we did with Hazlet. Thank you for reminding me. we worked out a template. So it had Hazlet, emergency Hazlet, and then we had a box. And we had a bunch of sample messages that we could just type in quickly, fire alert, traffic alert, weather alert, and then whatever the alert happens to be. Amber alert. Yes, there's a template, so it can be done so quickly. It can be done in a matter of minutes to be posted. There was a question about ballards and the pole. The pole is about an inch thick in terms of the metal around the pole. It's super strong. I don't think a car could knock it over. But if the board's concerned about that, we would certainly agree to install ballards as an additional step of protection to make sure. But I'm not aware of a car ever knocking over one of these single pole signs because they are so strong. We have many of them in parking lots. It's a very common place to put them. If the board wants us to install ballards as a protective measure, we're more than willing to do that. And also about the parking lot, this pole will only use one parking space. That is it. Really, once the sign goes up, it takes up about a 5-foot diameter area, 4-foot diameter area, with really no other. Vehicles can be parked under the sign, obviously based upon its proposed height, and there's no interference. So it's really no more than one spot will be lost by this proposed sign.
Mr. Gerber, have you covered all the items you wanted to address in your testimony?
I just wanted to double check. Just one other thing about the sign and the copy. Two things. One is the sign is a digital sign. It's illuminated during the day and at night. During the day, it's bright, so it can be seen. At night, it powers down. It's automatic, so that it's not overly bright at night. DOT does not allow any signs to cause any undue glare onto the roadway as for a safety issue, and these signs comply with that requirement. So the sign will be bright during the day, or if it gets cloudy, it will power down during the day. Depends upon what the ambient light level is, and that's automatic. And all these signs are consistent in terms of how they operate that way. The last thing I wanted to mention is copy content control. Towns can't really regulate what we put on the sign. You can't say we don't want this, we don't want that, but we know pretty much what towns don't want on the sign, and we can certainly offer the board as a voluntary condition that we would abide by, that there's not going to be any gentleman's club on this sign. There's not going to be any inappropriate copy. It's going to be what I would call a G-rated copy. It's going to be car dealers. It's going to be health insurance companies. It's going to be jewelers. It's going to be restaurants. It's going to be real estate agents, things of that nature. It's not going to be something that the town would be embarrassed that's on this sign. You're not going to see some strip club or whatever. That kind of stuff we'll certainly agree. We're requesting, actually, put it that way, that to be included in our approval if we're fortunate enough to get one.
Very good, Mr. Gerber. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, members of the board and your professionals, Mr. Gerber certainly welcomes any additional questions.
Any questions?
Actually, I have a clarification.
Yes, sir.
On the static sign, that's going to be externally illuminated?
Yes.
Are they going to be upward-facing lights or mounted on the top?
There will
facing
be on
down?
the bottom face to the sign, and these LEDs, these are new now, but we used to use a halide, and now we have these 100-watt LEDs. Used to be 400. We used to have 4 or 5 400-watt bulbs. Now we use 3 100-watt LEDs because the light can be so well focused onto the sign. It just illuminates just the sign face. It's a very good device, and it also saves a lot of energy too.
Thank you for clarifying.
I have a question for the our attorney. We can't request certain content as a condition for approval? Like if we don't want any X-rated content, not that you would do that, I'm just asking.
Well, the applicant's already agreed to that as a condition that they're going to
I'm just talking in general.
In general, the answer is, we got to be careful because there's First Amendment rights, even though some of the speech is commercial speech, which is regulated differently under the law. I'm telling Mr. Gerber what he knows. So within limits. So for example, there could be nothing lewd, there could be no nudeness on the sign, things of that nature. The applicant has offered as a condition, like I said, that he's going to have essentially your normal businesses and services, not G-rated, family-friendly type signage, no gentlemen's clubs or things of that nature. So that's already been on the record as they agree to that as a condition. I'll make sure I get it in the resolution.
You could have a gentleman's club advertised but not have it be lewd, but it still would be something you wouldn't want to see on a sign in your town. That's kind of what we're, of course, we would never do the lewd thing anyway, and we would agree to that as well, but I'm just trying to make a point. There's certain types of advertisers you don't want to see on a sign, and we want to let you know that we're not going to put them up, and we'll abide by that.
I'm just asking because we had a situation last year where there was a Triple X Expo in Somerset, I think, and that was displayed with some women on it. It was
controversial.
it was borderline.
That won't be on this sign. I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a convention that they had up in
Yeah.
Orchard. I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. It won't be on this sign. That kind of stuff will not be on this sign. That's exactly one of the things I'm talking about.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber, very much. Appreciate your testimony. Our next witness is Robert Newell, who is our lighting design expert. I'll have to have Mr. Newell sworn in.
Good evening, sir. Need to swear you in? You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please give us your name, spell your last name.
Robert Newell, N-E-W-E-L-L.
Thank you. Please continue.
Mr. Newell, to admit you as an expert in the area of lighting design, would you please briefly describe your educational background, your professional experience, your relationship to the applicant, and then we would qualify you as an expert, hopefully.
I am the principal of Robert Newell Lighting Design. We're a lighting consulting firm in Westfield, New Jersey. I've had the firm for 33 years now. I am not a licensed engineer. I'm not a licensed professional. The state or the nation does not require licensing for lighting design. I am not an engineer. I have been testifying and approved expert lighting witness across the state. I've appeared in Pennsylvania. I appear for this applicant. I appear in planning boards, boards of adjustment across the state, and county courts. And I've been doing this for over 25 years now.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. We would ask, Mr. Chairman, that the board accept Mr. Newell's qualifications in the area of lighting design.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you.
Terrific. Mr. Newell, my understanding is you've been retained by our client and the applicant to review this application. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you give us an overview of your findings and your conclusions, particularly with regard to the potential off-site impacts to the proposed signs, which obviously Mr. Gerber did indicate and discuss, but you will obviously address it from a different perspective. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Outdoor advertising, commonly known as billboards, that we're all familiar with, has changed over the last few years. Typical advertising have been vinyl signs, and before that paper signs with metal halide uplight shining on the signs. Transition occurred over the last 8-9 years to LED illuminated products, and today's standard are LED digital billboards. And these are, in this application, 14 by 48 signs that have LED modules in roughly 1-foot squares assembled to create one large basic video display. These digital signs are made up of LEDs that each have a particular output. They're all shielded. Each LED has a distribution of 140 degrees wide, 60 degrees vertical, and they're aimed slightly down so it reduces and minimizes sky glow. There is virtually no sky glow from digital signs because sky glow is created primarily by reflected light. The typical panel sign may...
What is sky glow?
Sky glow is light that is aimed up or reflected up into the sky, causing clouds. I mean, you see sky glow from New York City from around the region because the light from the city is going up into the sky. We try to reduce the sky glow, and LED billboards have significantly less sky glow compared to normal panel signs with metal halide fixtures, which just spill light side to side and up in the sky. These arrays of LEDs are typical in the sign of 14 by 48. They're multiple colors, and they generate the full color spectrum from white to black and everything in the middle. They generate visibility in different ways. A panel sign, like a vinyl sign, what you're seeing is reflected light coming off of the sign. Light is put on the sign, it's reflected off, and you see the reflection, and that's how you see the sign. A digital billboard, on the other hand, emits light. So this emitted light is focused in a very narrow band to highlight the target of the advertisers. These digital billboards don't spill light all the way to the side, left and right, up and down. It has a very narrow focus, in this case, down the highways. Their target audience is people in cars going north and south, and in a particular field of view between 250 to 500, in some cases longer distance. So the Outdoor Advertising Association of America and the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, have created standards across the industry that have been accepted and are used throughout the industry that have certain requirements of visibility for certain distances, for certain types of signs, and they regulate the amount of light, or they recommend the amount of light that will be seen from the viewers at a certain distance, at a certain location, and a certain viewing angle. Those requirements are standardized. They're adopted by the manufacturers of these signs, so they're all very uniform, and I've appeared a numerous amount of times for Interstate Outdoor, and it's the same digital billboard that has been put throughout the country. There's only a limited number of manufacturers around the country that offer these types of signs. The issues that we may be facing with any kind of signs is the off-site impact. The off-site in the field of view of the highway is controlled. It's exactly what it needs to be, and it's designed to those standards. There is concern about off-site and out-of-range residential areas, for example, and the advantage of a digital billboard over a standard billboard is that there is no spill light. There is no side spill or glare that is seen off to the side of the billboard. In this particular application, there is Kathleen and Robert Circle down below behind the sign. Kathleen is directly behind the sign, and a majority of that the residents on that street won't even see the sign for two reasons. It is behind the sign, and the signs are facing down the highway, and these residential properties are directly behind it. And number two, they're, as you heard testified before, they're over 30 feet below the base of the sign, and the sign being 60 foot. They're 98 feet below the sign. The light is going over their heads and not shining down onto the residential properties. And there's an extremely heavy buffer between those residential properties and the property that has a sign up above. Even in the winter time now with no trees, the dense forest creates a very, very good buffer. Doesn't make it invisible, but it prevents you from seeing any brightness from the signs. The properties on Robert Circle are farther away. They're a little higher by about 10 feet. The buffer between Robert Circle properties and this sign is extremely dense, and they're behind a slightly steeper hill. And from those circles, you can see the canopy of the Sunoco station, but and that's sitting right on the level of the grade, and you can't see much behind it. And that site has floodlighting on poles that are lighting that site that'll be more visible than the digital billboard. So the off-site impact in the residential areas adjacent to this property are negligible. They will not see any brightness from the face of these signs.
Mr. Newell, have you covered everything you would like to address in your testimony on the lighting and the potential impacts to off-site properties?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So just to summarize, though, in your professional opinion and based upon your review of the application, and I understand you've also visited, you've actually physically been to the site, correct, and the residential areas?
Day and night, yes.
Correct, okay. And your professional opinion is that based upon the potential spillage of the proposed digital sign from and to the adjacent residential areas, that the impact would be virtually negligible. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, there is no visual negative impact.
And you're comfortable also, given the difference in grade and the significant buffer and the trees that are there, that to the extent that there would be any ability to have any such spillage, it would be obviously negated by the difference in grade and the buffering there?
There is significant shielding from those neighborhoods, yes.
Great, thank you. I don't have anything further, Mr. Chairman, of Mr. Newell, but obviously the board or your professionals may have some questions.
Any questions of this witness by the board? Okay, proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Chairman, our planner is just arriving, so just give us 1 minute, please. Thank you. Apologize. Why don't we take can we take a 5-minute recess, Mr. Chairman? Okay. Thank you very much. I apologize.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, what they do, they went through this before. Oh, I guess. Computers, yeah. I didn't know you were going to make your way for me. Sorry. Get any feedback for its use, you think?
Oh, yeah, everyone was like, how did you get that?
Okay, we're ready?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Apologize for the few minutes delay. Next is our planner, John McDonough, who is going to testify on the planning-related issues and the variances and relief sought, and we would have to initially have Mr. McDonough sworn in, please.
Okay, Mr. McDonough, you swear firmly to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And please give us your name, spell your last name for the record.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Sorry to make you wait. My name is John McDonough, MC, capital D-O-N-O-U-G-H. I am the project planner.
Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
The board may be familiar with your background, but just for the record, if you would briefly describe your educational and professional experience, your obviously past experience relative to testifying before planning and zoning boards, because we would like to qualify you as an expert in planning. Thank you.
Sure. My license status has not changed since the last time I was here, which was a couple months ago. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, which is our national certification. Essentially lets us testify in any state. I testify on a nightly basis, including this, which I would categorize as a specialized form of land use throughout the state of New Jersey, and I've been accepted as an expert in New Jersey Superior Courts as well.
I move that we accept his credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mr. McDonough, it's my understanding that you have reviewed the application in connection with this proposed billboard. Is that correct?
In detail, yes, I have.
Okay. Would you, for the board and the public's edification, give us an overview, including the zoning and at issue, and also the justifications for the relief sought and identifying the variances? And obviously, I've indicated to the board that we seek a D3 variance because we do not satisfy some of the conditions of the conditional use, and would appreciate that. Thank you.
So that's the important part of the test here. This is a conditional use variance. This is not a pure use variance, so we're not within the domain of the Medici case. We don't have to deal with those enhanced proofs of particular suitability, reconciling the omission of the use from the ordinance and from the master plan. The use is contemplated here. The governing body does contemplate this here. There are a number of conditions. The applicant complies with many. The applicant does not comply with 4. That's what the relief is that the applicant is seeking here. So again, when we're dealing with a conditional use variance, we're dealing with a lesser burden of proof than the enhanced Medici test. And it's really akin to a bulk analysis. We know it has the higher burden of proof of 5 affirmative votes, but the essence of the analysis is really looking at the bulk and the mass, the scale, the location, and whether the site remains appropriate, notwithstanding those deviations. And we are here in the B3 Highway Business Zone. It's a permissive zone along the highway. We are on the Route 35, Route 9 corridor. It is a commercialized highway, categorized by commercial uses, as you've seen in the exhibits, including 4 gas stations around the subject site. Surroundings also include excellent buffering. We've got the nice mature vegetation and the drop-off to the residential uses that are behind. We are dealing with a developed piece of property in terms of the Trucks Auto Dealer. In terms of geometry, we've got a very large, spacious property here that is well-suited to accommodate the additional development before you. It is developed with a sales building and a very expansive sales yard, plus, as I said, that expansive perimeter buffering in the rear. The proposal, as you've heard, is to erect an industry-standard V-type configuration billboard, 672 square feet, 60 feet above the grade level, which is the height necessary to effectuate this, what is actually a beneficial use and a permitted use within your zone district. There are no other site changes proposed, no tree clearing that's required, which is important whenever we're dealing with this particular land use. No interference with the site operations as they presently exist. So again, tying this back to the zoning relief, there are 4 conditional use standards that are not met. The distance to another billboard, 930 feet is what's proposed, 1,000 feet is what's required. Again, the applicant has procured an outdoor advertising permit from the state, meeting the separation standards. And we know that the state agency are the stewards of highway safety, and those standards are based on regulations that are chock full of safety standards. So we'll come back to those regulations as we justify that. The distance to residential is required to be 300 feet. We're at 63 feet here. The height is at 60 feet above grade level, whereas 50 feet is what's allowed, and the setback from the front is 10 feet, whereas 30 feet is what the ordinance requires. So to tie this through the positive and the negative criteria under the statute, on the positive side, we see many benefits of this land use that would effectuate the purposes of the land use law, including the promotion of Purpose A, the promotion of the general welfare. This is a use that is an instrument of business. The companies that we work with, that we work for, that we invest in are the ones that advertise on what is essentially a message board. This land use also provides a message for inherently beneficial uses or community institutions such as houses of worship, schools, hospitals, and the like. Also use this form of media to get the word out and to convey their message. And then, of course, we know that this land use, as the courts have vetted out, is a form of constitutional free speech as well. It is a mechanism for rights under the Constitution in terms of free speech. The general welfare is also served because the site is very particularly suited for this use by virtue of its context, being that we are on a commercial highway, that the target market is the motoring public. It's right there. That's where this use is aimed at. And by virtue of the condition, to the extent that this is a very easy retrofit within a developed piece of property. And then, of course, in terms of particular suitability, the fact that DOT itself has established that this is, quote, a permitted location under the state regulations, NJAC 16:41.C. Those are the positive criteria. On the negative side, we'll look at each one of the individual deviations, but certainly from a planning standpoint, on an overview, relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the surrounding public. Visually, this use here at this location is substantially unperceivable from all vantage points except for the highway. It has that very narrow cone of vision to target its small target audience here. Functionally, the use is innocuous. There is no substantial traffic or noise generation, very narrow cone of illumination, and you've just heard the testimony from our illumination expert that there is not going to be any visual impact from an illumination standpoint on any of the surrounding properties. Safety-wise, there's no evidence of any correlation between billboards and driver distractions or accidents. And again, we do have the state permit here as the stewards of highway safety have established that this is safe at this location. Looking at the individual forms of relief that the applicant needs with respect to distance to another billboard, 930 feet versus 1,000 feet. It's 93% compliant, and in fact, the nearest billboard is a very small sign, so we think that the proximity is mitigated by virtue of the fact that it is a smaller sign in the context of what would be allowed. Whenever we're looking at conditional use relief, we look at the legislative intent, and we believe that the legislative intent of providing for that separation is to avoid visual clutter. Certainly by virtue of the fact that the closest sign here is an undersized sign, there's not going to be a perception of visual clutter by violation of that standard. So we see that relief being justified under the conditional use criteria. With respect to distance to residential, 63 feet versus 300 feet. The sign is going to be obscured at this location by physical features, the terrain and the foliage, as you've seen in the exhibits that have been provided, and the fact that we do have this nice 30-foot drop-off from the site to the adjacent residential uses. The back of the sign is going to face the neighbors. The lit portion is not. So we see justification for conditional use in that regard as well by virtue of the distinct physical features of this particular piece of property. The height, 10 feet above what's allowed under the ordinance, relatively modest in terms of the context of the use, is necessary to effectuate the readability and the functionality of the use. The sign has to be seen to serve its purpose as a permitted use. It will avoid interference with other signs along the roadway, and it violates no purposes of height control in that it does not block any scenic views or create any negative shadow effects on any of the adjacent residential properties. Importantly, we do have that tree line behind us. One of the planning reasons why we do have height controls, particularly with this land use, is that we don't want to create what I'll call a skyline effect or create a new skyline. This sign is going to blend with the backdrop and not extend above that ceiling or that threshold that's been established by the tree line. Lastly, with respect to the setback relief at 10 feet versus 30 feet, the support complies, only relates to the overhead component. In other words, the ground level structure does comply. This is only relating to the portion above. We think the planning benefit here is that it moves the sign further away from the neighbors. It would be nice if we could move it even closer to the roadway. We do have some wires above that we have to maintain a distance from. So we think the applicant has struck a nice balance here in positioning the sign horizontally on the property and vertically on the property, and again, in the context of the overall streetscape along the highway. All said, we know that the case law has established under Coventry that it is not necessary to establish that the use per se is appropriate at this location. It's not the use per se that is at issue, it's those deviations, and again, whether they substantially advance the purposes of zoning without creating substantial detriment. On the negative side, the TSI case is a relatively new case that clarified the negative criteria and essentially verified that the board does not have to evaluate this in the context of Medici and looking at the omission of the use from the zone. The core question is whether the site remains appropriate, notwithstanding the deviation. The evidence that's been put forth on the record answer that question in the affirmative. And for all of those reasons, I believe that the statutory criteria are met and the board can move favorably on this application.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Have you covered everything you want to address in your testimony on the justifications for the variances and the standards that you've referred to?
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further direct questions, Mr. Chairman, but your board members might, and your professionals may also.
Anyone from the board have any questions?
If I could. You had mentioned in one sign that's a smaller sign within, what, 993 feet or something like that?
930, yes.
Yeah, 930. What sign was that? I know there's a, do you calculate signs that are on the other side of the street too?
Yes.
Okay, because I know there's a Penyak sign in there. I don't know if that's within the 1,000 feet, but it seemed like it was a pretty large sign. I was just curious if that's the one you were thinking about.
No, and I don't know the brand name.
It is
It's
Peter.
been verified from
That's
my
correct, Mr.
applicant
Henry.
that, yes, that's the sign. And that is,
Okay.
that is an undersized sign.
Okay, you know, just my understanding, it seemed like it's a pretty large one to me when I go by that every day. But my question is, you talk about, I don't know if there's a question for you or not, but those signs are like almost at eye level or something like that. Now, if you're gonna be looking at this sign, you're gonna be going up this way a little bit more. Does that create any kind of distraction or safety issues at all? If you're looking at this sign and say, oh, I wanna see that sign, and you're going over that way.
No, again, it's pretty clear with this land use that it's just a glance. People glance at it to perceive it and to read it. And from a vertical standpoint, that cone of vision to go up to 60 feet is certainly not creating, I'll say, an extended period of distraction for a driver to be looking up at that sign.
Mr. McDonough, is that something within the purview of the DOT review and permitting?
That is one of the safety criteria, yes. As I said, the DOT standards are chock full of safety regulations, and that certainly goes into consideration of the outside agency permit.
Right, okay, I was just wondering, because it seems like you create another level of marketing, so to say. Most of the signs are low, street level, now this sign's gonna be higher, above all the other signs, and I was just,
Well, I liked it because it was only 10 feet higher
That's
than
not-
what the ordinance allows. And because of the structures in the area, we thought it was good planning to essentially flip it up one sign level higher than where it would otherwise be allowed to be. It's not a substantial deviation from what the ordinance contemplates. And again, we like the fact that we do have those taller trees behind it, so it does tend to saturate or blend
you know how
in.
tall those trees are in the back? Are they higher than
Well,
the sign
mature
themselves?
trees will get upwards, get 100 feet. In that area, in that area, we're constrained, so they're 65 feet.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gerber also wanted to address Mr. Henry's question on the height issue.
Yeah, the height, the sign is, we try to build the sign no higher than we have to build it. And what's driving the elevation of this sign is the Sunoco on-premise sign located to the north of the sign. When you're driving southbound on 9 and 35, that Sunoco sign starts to take out the sign at a pretty good distance. And so to get over top of that, based on the viewing angle sitting in a car, we've designed this to be just a few feet above that Sunoco sign. And that's really, I mean, there's a little bit of room there in terms of play. You don't want it to be too close to that sign, so it's a few feet above that. But that's why the sign's at the height that it is. If there were no obstructions, we would lower that sign because it costs us money to go up. It's more steel, it's more foundation. But that's the reason why it's at the height that it is.
And how high is this Sunoco sign?
It's about 24 feet, but again, it impacts the viewing angle. When you're heading north in a car, we poled it, and we rode this many times to select this height. And we put the pole, it would be the bottom of the sign, and we ride back and forth. And there's a couple feet there above the Sunoco just to ensure that we didn't make a mistake, because you don't want the Sunoco sign. It takes out part of the advertising face. It destroys it for advertising purposes.
Mr. Gerber, just to clarify, is that the Exxon sign you're referring?
The Exxon sign is to the south. This is even though the Exxon sign is higher, it's because it's set back, it doesn't impact this. The Exxon sign does not impact the sign at all. It's really because of the Sunoco sign, believe it or not. I would never guess that until we went out and polled it. You never would have believed that was the case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have got a question about that, because I'm actually looking at that here. So at what point does a Sunoco sign, like, how far down Route 9 do you have to be before the Sunoco sign's blocked out? Because I'm looking at the BP, and your sign would be clearly above that Sunoco sign.
I need to see what you're I can't see what you're looking at. Let me just come over real quick. Okay, all right. We have an exhibit too, but I got to see what he's talking about before I do that. Excuse me, if I could just see what you're... Okay, yeah, so we actually have a rendering I can show to you that will help you explain this for the Sunoco.
Mr. Gerber, I would suggest that we want to
hand those out to the
yes,
please.
I think we're up to 7.
We're
Eight.
A7, I believe, or A8.
Eight.
Eight. So we can hand these out and have them. We're going to identify it for the record.
Okay.
Identify with them and mark this A8 for the record.
Okay, this is an exhibit that shows a rendering that we did, and we put the sign at 50 feet. Why did we put it at 50 feet? Because that is the maximum height that was allowed under the code. And you can see how that Sunoco sign takes out the advertising copy at 50 feet. And that's why we put it up at 60. Now, we probably have a couple extra feet there, but that was just to make sure we cleared that Sunoco sign. But that's the rendering at 50 feet. That's about 250 feet from the sign, which is the prime viewing distance from our perspective for an outdoor advertising sign. And that starts to take out the copy. Advertisers hate that when they see that. Gotcha. So that's the reason why we built it. Because again, cost to put this up higher doesn't make it any better of a sign going higher up in the air. It just costs us more to build it. And it costs more in terms of steel and foundation. So this is what really, we initially tried to meet with the code. We always want to try to avoid the variances as much as we can, and we knew we couldn't. We tried the 50-foot overall height, and we couldn't reach it.
So, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber.
If you explain this one more time, is this at 60 feet or
This is 50. See, proposed sign at the bottom, it says overall height. It's proposed 50-foot. We tried, this was a rendering at 50 feet to show we couldn't make the 50-foot height.
Okay, so it will be 10 feet higher than what this shows.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, again, I said there was a couple additional feet there that we gave her a little bit of a buffer just in case, we're off by a little bit, but certainly at 50 feet it doesn't work.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber, for that explanation. Mr. Chairman, any members of the board have any other questions?
Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is open it up to the public.
Sure.
Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application? Is there anyone from the public wish to speak on this application?
I move we close the public portion.
Second?
Public portion is closed. Want to sum up?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, based upon the witnesses that we presented, particularly Mr. McDonough and his testimony on the planning and justification for the variances, we would ask that the board approve the application as presented, with the caveat, of course, that certain of the conditions of the conditional use cannot be established. I think we've also addressed some of the board's concerns relating to the off-site impact and spillage, as our lighting expert identified. And I think Mr. Gerber did an excellent job explaining why the site was located, a brief history of how the site was selected, and certainly the fact that we are now approved from the DOT to operate this particular billboard at this location. So with that said, I would certainly ask the board to act favorably on the application. If you have any additional questions, of course, the applicant's here to address those. Thank you.
What's the pleasure of the board concerning this application?
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, go
I was going to make a motion to approve the application with the conditions that were suggested about the advertising that would go on the sign.
Second?
Roll call?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kozinski?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, for your patience and for listening to all the testimony, and obviously we thank you for your approval. Thank you.
This will be memorialized at our next meeting.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go with the next one, right? Okay, the next application will be 18-4, Rite Aid.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Michael Page, and I'm the attorney for the applicant, Rite Aid. Just this evening, before we got here, I submitted the requisite jurisdictional documents, the public affidavit of publication, the affidavit of mailing, and the certified list of property owners, together with the certified mail receipts.
They've been received by the board. Applicant's jurisdiction is properly, notice is proper.
Thank you, counsel. Chairman, board members, this is an application for bulk variance approval to allow the applicant to add new signage and to reconfigure existing signage on the property, together with the variances for total square footage of signage for the property located at 3553 Washington Road, and that's block 33501, lot 3. With regard to this application, I will be presenting just one witness this evening, and that would be Mr. Jerry Canavan, who is Senior Project Manager of SEMA Network, who is the authorized representative of the applicant, Rite Aid.
Sir, just need to swear you. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please give us your name, spell your last name for the record.
My name is Jerry Canavan, last name Canavan.
Thank you, please continue.
Mr. Canavan, you are the Senior Project Manager for SEMA Network?
Yes.
And SEMA Network is the authorized representative for the applicant and the owner of the property, Rite Aid?
Yes, they are.
And you, in fact, prepared the plans, the sign permit package and the sign square footage details with regard to this application, correct?
We did, yeah, on utilizing Rite Aid's design concepts for their stores.
And if you would, if you could please take the board through the plans and describe to the board the details of the sign application, if you will.
Yeah, if you look on sheet 3 of the drawing, it shows the overview and what we're looking to do is on the blue canopy over the entrance, the GNC Live Well sign, which is currently in a center position, will replace the 1 hour photo, which is over on the left. Same sign will be moved over. There'll be no new signs on the blue canopy. The 1 hour photo will be taken down and scrapped. Other than that, the canopy will be cleaned as part of the regular work scope. For here, all signs will be cleaned, checked to make sure they're illuminating. The signs that we're asking for relief from are the Ready Clinic signs. There's one underneath each of the Rite Aid signs. And the purpose of those signs are to advertise an upgraded clinic facility that will be within the Rite Aid store. Along with those 2 new signs, there'll be a new panel on the pylon sign that's out on the road.
Sheet 9. I think it'll be sheet 9.
You found it good, it's all right.
That's all right.
We moved
I think it's number 8.
Yes, on sheet 9, and it's just a replacement of the, like-size replacement of the existing reader board sign beneath the Rite Aid pharmacy, the existing Rite Aid pharmacy sign. And again, it'll have the Ready Clinic copy on that sign to advertise that they have the Ready Clinic facility within the Rite Aid pharmacy. There's no change in square footage to the pylon sign. We're reducing somewhat the existing sign by eliminating the 1 hour photo sign. And of course, we're here because we're asking for the additional Ready Clinic signs, which will add approximately 32 square foot to each elevation, where 85 square foot is allowed by code.
And I guess further in your plans, in the later pages, there's also several drive-through signs that are being replaced as well?
Correct, yeah, same size. It will actually be, they opted to change out the whole sign rather than just repaint and put new copy on the existing signs. They tend to get beat up by lawn mowers and plows, and they wanted to just take them out and put in brand new signs. They replaced the existing code-conforming, previously permitted signs.
Thank you, Mr. Canavan. I have no further questions, and Mr. Board
Just
has.
to be clear and clarify, I didn't get good notes on the pylon sign that was on sheet 9.
Yes.
Is the resulting new sign in excess of any of the ordinance requirements?
No.
Okay, it's compliant, it's
yeah,
just new.
There's no change at all to square footage of that sign.
And then
The only change is, you know, we're replacing the face with a new face, which it needed anyway for maintenance. The tracks on those changeable copy signs get chipped and
Understood.
knocked around a little.
Yeah, just
as
to
it-
make sure we didn't have a variance situation. And then
Correct.
same thing with the directional signs on sheet 7, those are just replacement, they're
Same
compliant.
sign, same copy, same place, new sign, different color.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any questions of the board?
I have one question. You had mentioned Ready Clinic, but you never mentioned Hackensack Meridian Health. That's, I guess, is that a separate sign, or is that just one big sign? or-
It's one sign, it's all, we consider it the same sign, they go together, we don't do a Ready Clinic without the sponsor box next to it. This one happens to be Hackensack Meridian Health, they do have affiliations with other medical groups in other areas where that will have the appropriate medical group listed.
If you could, it's probably not part of the application, but could you explain what a Ready Clinic is?
I'm not 100%.
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, it's an expansion of the pharmacy to some extent. Something between a pharmacy and a patient-first type emergency clinic is what I gather from working with Rite Aid on.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
CVS, I think CVS has those clinics where you get flu shots and stuff like that.
Oh, I see, okay.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, they all have, the flu shot program, and this is expanding the flu shot program into some more wellness issues.
Will you be back to change over to Walgreens signs soon? or-
That's a big question. No, that's actually, Rite Aid, yeah, they wound up getting bought by Albertsons out of Idaho. Boise, Idaho, Acme is an Albertsons store.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we were trying to figure out what was going on for the last 2 years.
For this site?
Who knows whether it would have been included or not. No, we weren't that close. We did do some renderings for some sites showing, Rite Aid converted to Walgreens. No, it's not, part of this in any way, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Walgreens just gave up, with the FTC after a while. They put too much money into it, so not worth it anymore. Rite Aid is still viable. They will still be around. We are doing new construction Rite Aid stores, so they'll be around for a while anyway. I hesitate to say because you never know.
These signs, will they be illuminated at night?
Yes.
After the store closes, will they still be illuminated, or when the store closes, the lights go out?
When the Rite Aid stores differ. At some point at night, it all depends on how well the time clock is set. At some point at night, the signs turn off. It's usually around closing time, maybe a half hour after closing time. I know the local ones that I drive by every night, I work late often, they're off by 11 o'clock at night, the store closes at 9. Somewhere between, and I'm sorry, different days of the week, it differs again. I think it has to do with whoever's setting the clock. It's centralized energy management system. I don't know, but I know they're not on, it's not on, they're not still on.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Any other witnesses?
No other witnesses, Mr. Chairman.
I want to open this to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this Rite Aid application? Anyone from the public?
Move to close the public portion.
Second?
Public portion is closed. Mr. Page, do you want to sum up?
Mr. Chairman, board members, rather than taking your precious time, I think the applicant provided the testimony in detail. It's more or less, quick sum up is, adding the two Hackensack Meridian Ready Clinic signs, reconfiguring the other signs on the property. It's a rather straightforward application, and we would ask that the board hopefully act favorably upon it.
Okay, thank you.
Make a motion, we approve the application?
Second?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Okay, the application's been approved. It will be memorialized at our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. Thank you very much. Good evening.
We just make sure we get the pen. Yeah, let's be on the safe side. So, we'll make the announcement. So I'll make the announcement. Oh, yeah, you want to do that? Want to take care of that? Let's do the minute, not the minutes.
Has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes from February 28th, 2018?
I just want to make a correction. I was absent that day.
So noted. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes of February 28th, 2018?
So moved?
Second.
So, board members, we have listed on the agenda, we're done with all our normal business, a closed session, which zoning boards don't do that often. The chairman asked me to report back to the board on the status of two pieces of litigation that we have. One is the more recently filed, the 901 Ernston Road LLC, which we all know as the Recovery Centers of America case, and the other is the Batik Nindi case, which we all refer to as the Temple. So we're going to go into closed session in a minute to update the board on the status of those two pieces of litigation. The attorney who was representing the Temple case through the town's insurance policy is also here. He's sitting in the audience, and he will join us as well. There's certain claims that are covered under the town's insurance policy, certain ones aren't, in which my office would be handling. So we have to put on the record the Open Publics Meeting Act requires. So the Open Public Meeting Act requires that all business as defined in the act of the board be held in an open public meeting in which the public is available to be present. The act allows under certain circumstances to exclude the public. One of those is litigation. So there's issues we discuss in litigation we certainly don't want the other side knowing, strategy and things of that nature. So we will be going into closed session to discuss those two pieces of litigation I outlined. That will be the nature of the discussion. Even though there's no public here, we put this on the record. The meeting is not over. When we finish closed session, we will come back out here on the record, sit at the dais. We will call the meeting back to order. I will give a brief summary of our discussion in closed session without giving away anything that's attorney-client privilege or strategy. And then we will make a motion to go home and close the meeting. So we do have a little bit of a procedure just to go and talk privately. So with that on the record, I would ask for a motion to go into closed session.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. So
We're gonna go into room 310.
Jerry, you coming with us?
I'm coming?
Yeah, usually before the secretary does.
Oh,
Last
okay.
time you didn't come with us?
No,
No, all right. Yeah, come on.
okay.
Good idea, he'll be the first one in jail after this is all gets done. Right?
We got microphones? We do. Okay, Chairman, we got a call back there.
Okay, I want to call the zoning board of adjustment meeting of March 28, 2018, back in order.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As discussed, we had gone into closed session to discuss the litigation of the 901 Ernst Road LLC application and the Bhakti Nindi Inc. litigation. The purpose of the closed session and the extent of the closed session was to discuss the status of both those pieces of litigation, and in regard to the Bhakti Nindi Inc., which we call the temple, to discuss the impact of the religious land use law, otherwise referred to as RLUIPA. The minutes will remain confidential until such time as no longer need for confidentiality, and everything that was discussed in closed session is subject to attorney-client privilege. So we're now out of closed session. We are back in public session, and if there's no other business before the board, we can adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Night. You and Bob Foley, Mr. Chambers here.
Good night. Good night. Hey, Ron, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Hold on. Good night, Ron. Carl?
Carl's going to send you a letter.
So I understand my PSC.
There's been a controversy that came up today.
Oh, no?
Unless they're misunderstood, because I said, are you sure? I thought it's gonna be from the zoning board, it's gonna be, it's in, downtown.
Take care.
Takes it.
Yeah, I met with them.
Just keep it in the file.
Their
Don't
impression
give
of
it out to anybody unless you call me first.
There is no in-house planner. There's a woman, with an Indian. Yeah.
She's a contact person. She's not a licensed planner, though.
Oh, so I had a feeling they were a mistake.
Yeah. As long as the zoning board's usual planner still has a conflict, and their conflict was related to the Essex Urban League, that is a party to.
They're not involved anymore.
Yeah, I know there was litigation previously.
That
That was the West Side, wherever it was.
what they call McCarter Switch.
Yeah. So if
But did you do the Federal Square I don't remember who did the report for that one, because I did Federal Square and we had the 3 applications in one night, so they had different attorneys.
Yeah.
Federal Square and.
I was there for one. That was the first time I met you. Was at one of those
Yeah, so
zoning
you
board
did